If you watch this entire video, at the end of it, I want you to ask yourself a question. And that question is, could we have let this happen again? Could we let fear drive us into a repeat of what took place not so long ago? This video is a little old, it's a little grainy, but it's perhaps one of the most relevant pieces of footage in modern history. It's a piece from 60 Minutes, a few years after the failed swine flu vaccine rollout of 1976, and for some reason, nobody really talks about it anymore. The interesting thing was that millions of Americans rolled up their sleeves to get a shot that was rushed to market within just a few months for a virus that at the time had only killed one person. Well, eventually, the vaccine was pulled because there were reports of a serious side effect named Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is a neurological disorder that affected many that took the swine flu vaccine. And there were even news reports of deaths following the swine flu vaccine rollout. But those reports were largely ignored. One such person that had that severe side effect was a woman by the name of Julie Roberts, and it's important that you hear her story.
One of those who did roll up her sleeve was Judy Roberts. She was perfectly healthy, an active woman, when in November of 1976, she took her shot. 2 weeks later, she says, she began to feel a numbness starting up her legs.
I joked about it at that time. I said I'll be numb to the knees by Friday if this keeps up. By the following week, I was totally paralyzed.
So completely paralyzed, in fact, that they had to operate on her to enable her to breathe. And for 6 months, Judy Roberts was a quadriplegic. The diagnosis? A neurological disorder called Guillain-Barré syndrome, GBS for short. These neurological diseases are little understood. They affect people in different ways. As you can see in these home movies taken by a friend, Judy Roberts' paralysis confined her mostly to a wheelchair for over a year. But this disease can even kill. Indeed, there are 300 claims now pending from the families of GBS victims who died, allegedly as a result of the swine flu shot.
We need to understand how this happened to Julie and the thousands of other Americans that were affected by the swine flu vaccine that was rushed to market in an attempt to stop the emergence of a pandemic. If we go back to 1976, we'll see a scenario of the publicity machine being in full swing with commercials plastered all over people's television screens, like this.
I don't need another flu shot. I had a flu shot last year.
A swine flu epidemic may be coming.
Swine flu shot? Well, I don't know. I've been thinking about it.
It could make you very sick.
Swine flu? Man, I'm too fast to let it catch me.
You'll want to be protected.
I'm the healthiest 55-year-old you ever seen. Hey, I play golf every weekend.
Get a shot of protection. The swine flu shot.
That's right. Americans were told that the swine flu vaccines were safe and effective, with no mention of any serious side effects that may occur. The real danger that was communicated to people was the risk of contracting swine flu, and that it was best for everyone to report to their nearest vaccination center to get their shots, and people followed those instructions. But how serious was the threat? What were people actually afraid of? What was the risk to Americans? Why rush to bring this vaccine to market? The idea was to prevent a major outbreak of swine flu, and the root of this fear emerged from a military base in New Jersey, where ones of people were affected. And by ones of people, I mean not even 10 people had gotten infected. But you should take a look for yourself.
Where did this so-called deadly variety of flu, where did it first hit back in 1976? It began right here at Fort Dix in New Jersey in January of that year, when a number of recruits began to complain of respiratory ailments, something like the common cold. An Army doctor here sent samples of their throat cultures to the New Jersey Public Health Lab to find out just what kind of bug was going around here. One of those samples was from a Private David Lewis who had left his sickbed to go on a forced march. Private Lewis had collapsed on that march, and his sergeant had revived him by mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. But the sergeant showed no signs of illness. A few days later, Private Lewis died.
That's right. For some reason, the virus initially presented itself at a U.S. military base of all places. Now don't miss this. One person died, and 4 others who were sick recovered. And for some reason, this triggered a nationwide campaign to immunize everyone in the country. This is Dr. David Sencer, He was the head of the CDC during the swine flu non-outbreak that infected and killed ones of people around the world. And listen to what he has to say about the rationale behind the swine flu vaccination rollout of 1976.
Dr. David Senser, then head of the CDC, the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta, is now in private industry. He devised the swine flu program, and he pushed it. You began to give flu shots to the American people in October of 76.
October 1st.
By that time, how many cases of swine flu around the world had been reported?
There had been several reported, but none confirmed. There had been cases in Australia that were reported by the press, by the news media. There were cases in...
None confirmed. Did you ever uncover any other outbreaks of swine flu anywhere in the world?
No.
Based on the ones of people that died and the serious threat from no other outbreaks found around the world, people began lining up to be inoculated against swine flu. Because you know.
Joe brought it home from the office. He gave it to Betty and one of his kids, and to Betty's mother. But Betty's mother went back to California the next day. On her way to the airport, she gave it to a cab driver, a ticket agent, and one of the charming stewardesses. At school, Joe's kid gave it to some other kids, and Mrs. Merrill got it and gave it to her husband. In California, Betty's mother gave it to her best friend, Dottie, but Dottie had a heart condition and she died. But before she died, Dottie gave it to her girlfriend, the mailman, the paper boy, and the vet when she went to pick up her chihuahua.
If a swine flu epidemic comes, this is how it could spread. You'll want to be protected, especially if you're elderly or chronically ill. Get a shot of protection, the swine flu shot.
As I said, millions of Americans lined up and rolled up their sleeves, and all the preparations were made. The doctors were there, the nurses were there, the people were there. But there was something very important that was missing from these vaccination centers, and that thing was informed consent. Informed consent did not show up at these vaccination facilities because the complete information regarding the swine flu vaccination was not provided to the people. But I'll let you see for yourself.
Now, nearly everyone was to receive the shot in a public health facility where a doctor might not be present. Therefore, it was up to the CDC to come up with some kind of official consent form, giving the public all the information it needed about the swine flu shot. This form stated that the swine flu vaccine had been tested. What it didn't say was that after those tests were completed, the scientists developed another vaccine. And that was the one given to most of the 46 million who took the shot. That vaccine was called X53A. Was X53A ever field tested?
I can't say. I would have to...
It wasn't.
I don't know.
Well, I would think that you're in charge of the program.
I would have to check the records. I haven't looked at this in some time.
And this is where I want you to answer the question for yourself. Could we let this happen again? Could once again people have made a medical choice without having fully informed consent? Here we have a vaccination program using a vaccine that was rushed to market and not properly tested. And for some reason, the people were not given this information. Also missing from the consent form was a proper list of the side effects so that people could make an informed decision about whether or not this shot could cause any long-term side effects. This couldn't possibly happen again, or could it? This is what Julie Roberts had to say about what she was told about the side effects for the swine flu vaccine.
The information form, the consent form, was also supposed to warn people about any risks of serious complications following the shot. But did it?
No, I had never heard of any reactions other than a sore arm, fever, this sort of thing.
Judy Roberts' husband, Gene, also took the shot.
Yes, I looked at that document. I signed it. Nothing on there said I was going to have a heart attack or I get Guillain-Barré, which I never heard of.
That's right. For some reason, Americans were told that there would only be mild symptoms from the shot, nothing serious. They were told that the swine flu vaccine was safe and effective. But the question that begs to be answered is, did the CDC know about the other serious side effects? I'm sure they did extensive testing. I'm sure that the swine flu vaccine was put through the most rigorous of testing. But for some reason, the CDC director stated that he had no knowledge of any serious side effects related to the swine flu vaccine. However, The director for the surveillance team for swine flu at the CDC said something completely different regarding whether or not there were any severe adverse reactions related to the swine flu vaccine.
Dr. Michael Hatwick directed the surveillance team for the swine flu program at the CDC. His job was to find out what possible complications could arise from taking the shot and to report his findings to those in charge. Did you know ahead of time, Dr. Hatwick, that there had been case reports of neurological disorders, neurological illness, apparently associated with the injection of influenza vaccine?
Absolutely.
You did?
Yes.
How'd you know that?
By review of the literature.
So you told your superiors, the men in charge of the swine flu immunization program, about the possibility of neurological disorders?
Absolutely.
What would you say if I told you that your superiors say that you never told them about the possibility of neurological complications?
That's nonsense. I can't believe that they would say that they did not know that there were neurological illnesses associated with influenza vaccination. That simply is not true. We did know that.
So who's telling the truth? Did the CDC know, or didn't they know? I'll let you decide. But what we do know is that shortly after the vaccine started being given to millions of Americans, rumblings of people dying shortly after being vaccinated started to emerge. And you can see it for yourself in this news clip from 1976.
This is Channel 7's 11 o'clock Action News with Bill Bonds, John Kelly, and Detroit's #1 news team.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Bill Bonds, and here's a look at what's happening tonight. And what's happening is that the swine flu vaccination program ground to a halt from coast to coast today. There have been now 12 reported deaths so far, with victims dying just a few hours after receiving those inoculative shots. All of the victims were elderly persons, and all, we are told, died of apparent heart attacks. In the state of Michigan, the state health director, Maurice Reisen, ordered a stop to all swine flu shots after 3 Michigan men died hours after receiving their vaccinations. Health officials estimate that 10,000 Michigan people have already received their shots, and President Gerald Ford told ABC Television News tonight that he intends to get his vaccination.
Now, we're in the process of making a thorough investigation, but there is no precise information that those deaths came about as a result of the immunization.
While you were making this investigation, what should people do?
From all the evidence I've seen so far, people should continue. I'm going to do it as quickly as I possibly can myself, and our family will, because we're convinced that it's in the best interest of all of our citizens.
Well, here's where we stand as of tonight. The Center for Disease Control in Atlanta, Georgia is saying that there is no evidence yet, that they have at least been able to discover, that the 12 deaths were connected to that swine flu vaccine. It's quite a story, John.
For some reason, despite the fact that 12 people had died shortly after receiving the shot, many, including the President of the United States, chose to push forward with a vaccination program for a virus that had infected and killed ones of people. When asked about the documents from the CDC that listed neurological disorders as a side effect, for some reason, the CDC director's hands went like this, as he tried to explain why they did not tell the American people that there were more serious side effects than just fevers and muscle aches. So, how did they get so many Americans to get the swine flu vaccination after seeing only ones of infections and deaths? It was a mixture of fear and celebrity.
As part of informing Americans about the swine flu threat, Dr. Sensor's CDC also helped create the advertising to get the public to take the shot. Let me read to you from one of your own agency's memos planning the campaign to urge Americans to take the shot. The swine flu vaccine has been taken by many important persons, he wrote. Example, President Ford, Henry Kissinger, Elton John, Muhammad Ali, Mary Tyler Moore, Rudolph Nureyev, Walter Cronkite, Ralph Nader, Edward Kennedy, etc., etc. True?
I'm not familiar with that particular piece of paper, but I do know that at least of that group, President Ford did take the vaccination.
Did you talk to these people beforehand to find out if they planned to take the shot?
I did not know.
Did anybody?
I do not know.
Did you get permission to use their names in your campaign?
I do not know.
That's right. The president got it, sports figures like Muhammad Ali were getting it, and everyone's it girl at the time, Mary Tyler Moore, had gotten it. So why shouldn't everyone else? But the only problem was that besides President Ford, it was never verified if any of these other people had taken the shot.
Mary, did you take a swine flu shot?
No, I did not.
Did you give them permission to use your name saying that you had or were going to?
Absolutely not. Never did.
Did you ask your own doctor about taking the swine flu shot?
Yes, and at the time he thought it might be a good idea. But I resisted it because I was leery of having the symptoms that sometimes go with that kind of inoculation.
So you didn't?
No, I didn't.
Have you spoken to your doctor since?
Yes.
And?
He's delighted that I didn't take that shot.
What a statement. At the time, Mary Tyler Moore was delighted that she did not take that shot, and her hesitancy was warranted, as there were so many Americans that experienced life-altering effects from the swine flu vaccine. And for those who were affected, they were unheard by the government that had compelled them to take these shots, and now they were unable to receive adequate compensation. If people really knew the risks, would they have rolled up their sleeves so quickly? Would they have made a different decision or have been more cautious? But that was then, and this is now, right? Those were the old days, right? We would never allow something like this to happen again. Or could we?